have several sentiments in mind as I get started. One is gratitude for you for being here, gratitude to Trey for singing, powerful as always. And one is regret at the rubric at which I used to choose the three incidents that I hope to discuss today. It was basically things that can still make me cry every time that I talk about them. The theme is moments of change, transition, and transformation. That's the theme for the semester of Newman Lumen. And these are three things, three episodes, three encounters that are still unfolding in my life, that every time I think about them for more than 5 minutes, I do weep openly. So we will see how it goes this morning. But this is I realize that we're a more seasoned crowd, but as the undergraduate years are a time of such intense transformation, and all of these episodes began in my undergraduate years. The summer after my first year at UVA, I spent 7 weeks in Assisi. And I did not know St. Francis from Adam, other than that he was often depicted with birds and gardens. But that became a space of real sort of conversion for me. I had always had the expectation or understanding that what it meant for me to be a Christian that definition was so culturally constructed. It was to not drink or smoke or have sex and make good grades. That was my definition. And I think that the encounter with Jesus and with the holiness of the person of Francis was really challenging. I found myself completely transfixed by these little details of Francis's life. Post-conversion, one of the first things he does is sells everything he owns and then goes and spends time with lepers. He goes to the part of the city which they called the Hill of Hell because it was filled with refuse and people who were outcast. And he ministered to them, cared for them. He probably had leprosy and malaria and many other things when he died because of this intense concern for the lost. And then in an encounter which now seems like charmingly naive for me, Francis's own conversion, some of the most powerful moments happened in prayer before a cross. And I didn't know where the real one was. It's in Santa Chiara. I didn't know where it had been when he was praying. It's in San Damiano. I was in a 19th-century created space with a copy of the cross with nothing on the walls. But it seemed very old to me because it was stone. And so here was the thing about that cross and that space. It is not just a cross. It's a cross with a painting of Jesus on it. And it's a cross with a painting of Jesus, not noble and unmoved, but weeping and wounded. And this is a moment for me that I thought, well, here my cultural definition of Christianity comes into contact with another way of thinking about it. And I guess I don't need Jesus in my definition of Christianity. My definition of good is completely independent of any work. And here's the cross, and here is work being done on the cross, and here is a weeping, crucified Christ. What do I make of that? And my time in Assisi was the time that I thought, either I walk away from this whole thing, or else I accept that I need grace and that sacrifice is in part for me. I just walked around Assisi sobbing openly, and it still sort of invites that. But that was a moment of real transformation for me. I returned again and again to Assisi. It became the thing which I would sell everything I owned to do, which literally I did. Every other summer for the next 10 years, I would work and pay my credit card debt, and then the next summer I would go to Assisi. And I had 0 hotel rooms reserved, and I would just wander around and have adventures and pray. And that was a sweet season of life. So this encounter with Francis continues to kind of animate me. I'd never known anyone to live with such abandon. We'll return to Francis, but the next encounter was with someone who's alive, even still. I got back after the summer of 1994 in Assisi, and I told the director of this youth ministry, I'm sorry, I can no longer actually be a leader. They'd chosen me for a leader in my second year of college. I said, because I learned that I'm actually a sinner. And the guy said, well, I'm pretty sure that's okay. I'm pretty sure that's part of the human condition, and it might actually, your awareness of that might actually better qualify you for this work. But at his suggestion, I began a 2-year relationship, which was the most important, outside of my marriage, human relationship, with a fellow named John Yates, who was only 1 year older than I. But he offered to meet with me for 1 hour every week. I still can't believe this investment of time. I thought he was the coolest guy ever. But every Tuesday morning at 7:30, we would meet at Little John's on the corner at UVA. And 7:30 was early back then, not early anymore. And I would get a toasted bagel with cream cheese and strawberry jam. And we would have our hour. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what to expect from those hours. I shared with him everything about my life. I asked him every question I could think of about what it meant to be a Christian and how to grapple with this new reality that I had discovered that I was a sinner, and what my ministry should look like and my life should look like in light of this. And his sustained and careful care and attention, I think there's a classical Christian term now, discipleship for it, of me for those years, made me realize a couple of things. One, truly transformative relationships require so much investment. I mean, at Elon, we're about engaged learning. We're about changing lives. Sometimes lives are changed in the context of 1 or 2 encounters. Way more often, lives are changed in fundamental ways in the context of commitment, over time, sustained, sacrificial love for another person. Our culture does not do that well. Deep and sustained investment in other human beings. And when you get it, you feel like the luckiest person in the world. I just felt like such a prince and still do. So that is one thing. And the other thing I learned is that Christianity wasn't this one-time conversion experience for me. I got kind of attracted to C.S. Lewis and some of the images that he has higher up and further in. There's always more adventure. And actually, there's kind of a wonderful disequilibrium in Christianity. You think you get it just right, and all of a sudden, some little life circumstance changes. You have a child, your wife loses a job, someone gets sick, someone dies, and everything's different. And everything is configured again. It's always a moving target. And being in relation with John and charting all those transitions through undergrad helped me get a sense of that adventure. And it didn't have to stop, and it wasn't a one-time thing. At the risk of opening up the floodgates, seriously, my gratitude is so intense. I mean, on John's wedding, I had a little note under before the wedding night. But the night before, saying, look, that story of David and Jonathan in the Bible, I'll be your Jonathan. I'll do anything you need. And then I wrote to his parents just under a year ago because I was having one of those days where I couldn't stop thinking about how grateful I was. And I wrote to them. The father's also a minister. John's a minister now, in ways that I thought would be meaningful to them and certainly were to me. I always thank God for your son, John, I wrote, for the way he loved me and shared Christ with me while we were at UVA. Every so often, however, the feelings of gratitude become so intense that they are literally almost unbearable. I cannot quite describe it, but it must be akin to the feeling one has when walking away from an accident and seeing one's vehicle in flames. I simply don't know what I would have done or become without John. Perhaps the Lord would have drawn me to himself in some other way, but John was the instrument he chose to use. John kept encouraging me to submit more and more fully to Jesus, in whom I have placed all of my hopes in this crazy, broken world. That's a second transformative encounter. Still ongoing, still in touch with them. Finally, the thing I studied in school was Southern history. One does not have to study Southern history very long, particularly 19th century Southern history, to see racial injustice. And racial injustice is this big storyline, the big storyline of Southern history and American history, I think. And what started as an intellectual awareness became an ongoing journey of spiritual transformation, which is the final of these 3 transformations I want to mention. I had a long way to go, still have a long way to go, but I had the perspective at the beginning of undergrad, well, why would you study African American history? Why would you need to study American history? I hadn't sort of understood the ways that American history has been coded as white history systematically over 200, over hundreds of years. I hadn't had those sort of breaks yet. I had encounters like the remarkable encounter. I was president of this honor society, EVA, and I had the team into my room. I had hanging on the wall a picture of Robert E. Lee, and I had some Confederate playing cards. And LaWanda Jiggets and Vanessa Watkins stayed afterwards and communicated to me how unwelcome that made them feel in my room. And I kept studying Southern history and kept seeing white supremacy and white racist violence. I had the joy of taking Julian Bond's class as an undergraduate and then TAing for him my third year in graduate school. And I got it. I started seeing the world in a different way. Started seeing white supremacy everywhere. Started counting faces. Started looking at law. Started wondering why things were the way they were. I developed particular attachments. Julian Bond used to make fun of me for my enthusiasm for Charles Sherrod, who's still alive, but no one ever talks about. But if you've ever seen the Eyes on the Prize video series about the civil rights movement, Charles Sherrod is the man, and I love him with a fiery passion. And in Bond's class, I learned of the National Civil Rights Memorial, at which Bond had presided over the installation of this sculpture commemorating 40 martyrs to the movement, which is it's a fountain of water flowing over the names of these martyrs. And over Amos 5:24, which is an Old Testament Bible verse, it's, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. And all of a sudden, the academic things I was learning sort of mapped on to this real spiritual charge or mission for me. And I thought, there's lots of work to do in God's kingdom. The work of reconciliation is immense. My little part of it, I think, wants to have to do with racial justice. That's what I'm studying. That's what I know about. I cannot speak to everybody. I don't know everything, but I can speak to white people about how things they don't think are racist, because that's been my journey of self-discovery. And I love and hate this work. I love this work because it feels so clean and straightforwardly married to all of my highest religious commitments, and so urgent and so necessary, and because it leads me into such wonderful human solidarities, and because unlike other kinds of work or achievement, there's no ladder of success that you can climb. I always fail, every time. I'm never enough. I'm always the awkward white guy. I never understand fully the ways in which white supremacy has been tangled into all these other things. Like, my resources are never enough. And actually, that's a great place for me to be. Never get it, never cocky about it, because I always lose. That doesn't sound very exciting. I think there are two bits of excitement there. One is, I think, one of the abiding thieves of joy is spiritual pride. And so being engaged in a work that is bigger than you are and greater than your capacities short circuits that evil pathway of spiritual pride in ways I think are life-giving. But also, I buy totally the vision of a better world, a better America, a more egalitarian world, a world where we acknowledge differences and love across them. That's a better vision. I love it so much. And any little tastes I get it are that exciting. They're that much food for the soul. I'm going to plagiarize myself again by reading an email that I wrote to two friends at Elon with whom I pray and for whom I am very grateful. One's in the room, about the joy that I had participating with Trey, how we met, the only time we've ever met until today, which I am so grateful to you for being here, at a gospel choir concert earlier this semester. I just couldn't believe that I got to participate in that. It's like the best thing ever. I write to share with you, dear friends, a thanksgiving and a prayer request. I tremble even to write the news. It seems so sacred and tender a thing. By the grace of God, I have the opportunity to speak next Sunday I really just still can't believe it. At the Elon Gospel Choir concert, I cannot convey how meaningful I find the invitation to be or how earnestly I want to do the right by the group. I really do feel as if the master of the feast has just called me up from the lowest seat to the highest. It is an extraordinary experience of unmerited favor. I am so thankful. And I invite you to share in celebration of a God who can make crooked roads straight and can use broken vessels. So being inadequate is actually great sometimes because when you get these moments of cooperation and inclusion despite your inadequacy, that's grace. That's the good stuff. And that is what I have experienced in and through caring about racial justice. One other thought before Trey comes up to close. Trey, I have just done some violence to the imagined perfect story arc here, but it's worth it. You know how when two things from different parts of your life all of a sudden line up and it seems really cool and powerful? So I wanted to mention a couple of those resonances across these three themes: Francis, John Yates, social justice, and then Trey will come up. So just as I started realizing what John Yates was up to, this whole discipleship thing, I went back to Assisi because that's what I did every time I could. And I stopped to see John, and he was working in London at the time, and he gave me G.K. Chesterton's biography of St. Francis, which was this completely tender, thoughtful gesture. And I read it in an olive orchard looking down on the basilica in one ravenous afternoon. It was the best day of my life. And then I went down into the tomb of St. Francis, and in the tomb of Francis, I had never noticed, having been there many times before, that around him in a circle are four of the folks whom he discipled. Rufino, Angelo, Maceo, I forget the fourth. But he's important too. Leo, Brother Leo, how can I forget Brother Leo? But those resonances, feeling that, hey gosh, this thing was important to John and I'm experiencing important for him, it kind of create this sense of fullness and abundance that has sort of fueled me. So those are things for which I'm grateful. I'm grateful to Trey, and I am grateful to share, for the chance to share with you all, and for the chance to do meaningful work. And I think this work for justice is meaningful work.